A pastor stood at the pulpit, his voice rising with conviction as he guided his congregation. Behind him, a family appeared whole, smiling for a photo that concealed untold struggles. Elsewhere, a lone figure sat in the shadows of a car, their purpose unknown. Then came the flash of red and blue lights breaking through the darkness, signaling a life lost and questions that demanded answers. This is a story of a man trusted by his community, a web of betrayal uncovered, and a crime that left devastation in its wake. This is the case of Pastor Tracy Burleson. Houston, Texas, stretched beneath the morning sun, a city bustling with life and promise. Among its neighborhoods stood a modest church, a sanctuary for those seeking hope and guidance. Inside, Pastor Tracy Burleson spoke with authority, his words carrying the weight of faith and reassurance. To those who filled the pews, he was a man of conviction, leading his flock with unwavering purpose. Behind the church doors, Tracy's life appeared equally steadfast. Paulette Burleson, his wife, was known as a devoted partner and a supportive presence. Together, they represented a union built on shared values and spiritual commitment. Photographs captured their smiles, moments of joy frozen in time, showing a bond that seemed unshakable. Yet away from the congregation and beyond the family portraits, another narrative began to emerge. It was a story unspoken, hidden from the eyes of those who looked to him for leadership. It involved another name, another face, Tyon Palmer. Tyon, a figure outside the family circle, became connected to the pastor in ways that defied his public persona. Her image told a different chapter, one tied to whispers of meetings and decisions that would come to alter lives irreparably. The contrast between appearances and reality grew sharper, each passing day revealing cracks that no sermon could conceal. What began as quiet choices would soon find their way into the open, leaving a trail of questions and an outcome that no one could have foreseen. In Houston, Pastor Tracy Burleson was known as a man of faith, but faith alone could not hide what was to come. A journey from trust to betrayal, from leadership to loss, and from love to tragedy. Tracy Burleson and Paulette came together through shared faith and a mutual commitment to their church. Their union symbolized partnership, with Paulette often supporting Tracy's pastoral work behind the scenes. To those who knew them, they were a team united by purpose, their roles complementing each other as they guided their congregation through life's challenges. Family photographs from their early years together tell a story of happiness and shared goals. They show moments of celebration, milestones that brought them closer as they built their lives around their ministry. Inside their church, Tracy's sermons resonated with sincerity and conviction, while Paulette's quiet strength made her an integral part of the community. As the years went on, the pressures of leadership and personal struggles began to affect their relationship. Tracy's role as pastor demanded much of his time and energy, and Paulette often shouldered the responsibilities of maintaining their home life. The outward image of stability and devotion masked the growing distance between them, a distance that neither seemed able to bridge. During this time, Tyon Palmer entered Tracy's life. She was someone from outside his marriage, someone whose presence offered him an escape from the difficulties he faced at home. Their relationship began in secrecy, initially unnoticed by those around them. Tracy's growing attachment to Tyon became a significant part of his life, a development that created a divide between him and Paulette. Tyon represented something different. Her interactions with Tracy contrasted sharply with the life he shared with Paulette. As their relationship progressed, it became increasingly difficult for Tracy to maintain the facade of his marriage while pursuing this new connection. Inside the church, the congregation continued to gather, unaware of the personal struggles of the man they trusted to lead them. Tracy's sermons remained passionate and focused, but behind the scenes, his personal life was becoming more complex. Paulette, who had once been a source of unwavering support, began to notice changes in his behavior. The strain on their marriage grew as Paulette confronted her suspicions. Conversations between them turned tense, with Paulette seeking answers and Tracy deflecting her questions. The once stable foundation of their relationship was now overshadowed by doubts and mistrust. Tyon's presence in Tracy's life was no longer a secret. The bond they shared became a source of contention, not just between Tracy and Paulette, but within the lives of those who were closest to them. Decisions made during this time would have far-reaching consequences, altering the trajectory of their lives in ways no one could have foreseen. In the church where Tracy preached about values and faith, another reality was unfolding. It was a reality that challenged the trust placed in him by his congregation and the commitments he had made to his wife. The choices made in those moments would set the stage for events that would change their lives forever, leaving behind a story of betrayal, loss, and questions that demanded answers. On the evening of May 18, 2010, the quiet suburb of Houston was shattered by a tragedy that would leave the community in shock. Paulette Burleson, a woman known for her quiet strength and dedication to her family, was found dead outside her home. A single gunshot wound to her head had ended her life in an instant, and the circumstances surrounding her death would soon unravel a dark and complicated story. The night had begun like any other, but by the time the police arrived at the scene, the peaceful neighborhood had been transformed into a crime scene. Investigators were met with the grim reality of what had occurred. Paulette's body lay in the driveway, her life taken so suddenly, and no obvious signs of struggle were visible. Yet the scene was far from ordinary. The authorities quickly began their work, combing through the area for any signs that might point to the killer. Evidence was collected with care, items that could hold the key to understanding what had happened. There were no witnesses, no clear motive on the surface, but the details would slowly begin to come together. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that this was not a random act of violence. Paulette Burleson had been targeted. The question of who and why began to take shape. It didn't take long for detectives to consider those closest to Paulette, the people who would have had the most to gain from her death. Tracy Burleson, Paulette's husband, was one of the first to be questioned. His connection to the crime seemed improbable at first. A respected pastor, a man who had spent years in the public eye, had no apparent reason to harm his wife. But as investigators dug deeper, a different story began to emerge, one that was hidden beneath layers of secrecy. The evidence started to paint a clearer picture. Detectives reviewed phone records, bank statements, and witness testimony. It became apparent that Tracy's relationship with Tyan Palmer was not the only secret he had been keeping. There were financial irregularities, signs of manipulation, and a motive that, while subtle, began to show itself. What had initially seemed like a random act of violence now appeared to be a carefully planned murder, a tragedy that stemmed from betrayal and greed. The more investigators uncovered, the more they realized that Tracy, along with his son, William Fuller, and Tyan Palmer, had been involved in a scheme that ultimately led to Paulette's death. The crime scene itself, while simple in appearance, was the starting point for a much larger investigation that would expose a web of lies. The police focused on the details, where the bullet had entered, the lack of defensive wounds, and the positioning of Paulette's body. Each piece of evidence, no matter how small, began to reveal the truth. What had seemed like a straightforward case of domestic violence quickly turned into something far more intricate. As the investigation deepened, the authorities began to connect the dots between the affair, the financial motives, and the cold-blooded execution of Paulette Burleson. The truth, buried beneath layers of deception, was beginning to come to light. But the more the detectives uncovered, the more disturbing the story became. This was not just a crime of passion, it was the result of months of planning, manipulation, and betrayal. The people closest to Paulette had been the ones who betrayed her, and their actions would lead them down a path from which there was no turning back. Within hours of Paulette Burleson's death, detectives began to piece together the fragments of a puzzling and tragic story. The investigation, initially focused on the crime scene itself, soon expanded as investigators dug into the lives of those closest to Paulette. What they uncovered would shock everyone involved. The first piece of the puzzle came in the form of phone records. Tracy Burleson's communications revealed an ongoing affair with Tyan Palmer. The calls and text messages between them painted a clear picture of a relationship that had grown beyond a simple friendship, a relationship kept hidden from the people who trusted Tracy the most. As detectives examined these communications, it became evident that this affair had been the catalyst for the events leading up to Paulette's murder. Further investigation revealed that Tyan's involvement in this plot was more extensive than initially suspected. She was not just the other woman in Tracy's life. She had become entangled in a much darker plan. The connection between her and Tracy's son, William Fuller, was also uncovered. It was revealed that Tyon and William had been involved in discussions about the murder, and William had, in fact, become a key player in the crime. Detectives quickly turned their focus to William. His interviews with investigators were filled with tension, and his story evolved as he realized the depth of the situation he was in. At first, he denied involvement, but the pressure of the investigation soon brought the truth to light. William admitted to pulling the trigger that killed his mother. He explained that Tracy had manipulated him into believing that it was the only way to secure a future for himself and to free his father from the constraints of his marriage. The revelation that William had been coerced by his father was a crucial turning point in the case. It was clear that Tracy had not only betrayed his wife, but had also used his own son as a pawn in a deadly game. The power dynamics between father and son and the manipulation that had taken place were staggering. Tracy had convinced William that the murder was justified, motivated by money, by the desire to continue his relationship with Tyon, and by the hope of a life free from the ties of his marriage. As investigators continued to unravel the web of deceit, they discovered more disturbing details. Text messages between Tracy and Tyon revealed a relationship built on more than just affection. It became clear that their affair was rooted in a shared desire to remove Paulette from the picture permanently. Tracy had been aware of the consequences of his actions, but continued to pursue his own desires, blind to the devastating impact on his family. Phone records confirmed that Tracy had been in constant contact with both Tyon and William in the days leading up to Paulette's death. There was no doubt that Tracy had been the driving force behind the murder, subtly manipulating and encouraging his son to carry out the act. The plan, however, did not go as smoothly as Tracy had hoped. The final pieces of the investigation fell into place when detectives uncovered financial records showing that Tracy had taken out a life insurance policy on Paulette just weeks before her death. The payout from the policy, which would go to Tracy and William, added another layer of motive to the case. It was not just an affair that had driven the plot. It was the promise of money, of a fresh start, and of a future free from the constraints of Paulette's presence. What had initially appeared to be a tragic act of domestic violence now revealed itself to be a carefully orchestrated crime, set in motion by a father's manipulation of his son and the greed that had overtaken both men. The investigation was closing in on the truth, but it was clear that the impact of these discoveries would ripple through their lives forever. As the investigation into Paulette Burleson's murder progressed, it became clear that the case would not end with the arrest of those involved. It would be taken to court, where the full extent of the betrayal and manipulation would be laid bare for the world to see. The courtroom became the stage for a tragic drama, one that would reveal the depths of deceit within a family and expose the lengths to which a father had gone to secure his desires. The trial began with a tense atmosphere. Media outlets from across the country gathered to cover the high-profile case. Cameras captured the emotions of the Burleson family, who sat quietly in the courtroom, struggling to make sense of the man they once called a husband and father. As the prosecution laid out its case, it became clear that the motive behind Paulette's murder was not one of passion or anger, but of cold calculation. Tracy Burleson, the man who had once preached of love and compassion, was revealed to have orchestrated a plot to gain financial freedom and continue his affair with Tyon Palmer. The prosecution highlighted the life insurance policy Tracy had taken out on Paulette just weeks before her death. The payout from that policy would provide a substantial sum to Tracy and his son William. The financial motive was undeniable. It became clear that Tracy had planned the murder not only as a means of ending his marriage, but also as a way to secure his future with Tyon and eliminate any obstacles to his desires. The defense attempted to portray Tracy as a man overwhelmed by personal struggles and the pressures of his life. But the evidence was overwhelming. Phone records, text messages, and financial records all pointed to the same conclusion. Tracy had not only betrayed his wife, but had manipulated his son into carrying out the murder. His actions were driven by greed, and his willingness to destroy his family to achieve his goals was evident throughout the proceedings. Tyon Palmer's involvement was also examined in detail. While she was not the one who pulled the trigger, she had been a willing participant in the plot. Her communications with Tracy revealed that she had been fully aware of the plan to eliminate Paulette. Tyan's role in the crime was undeniable, and she too would face the consequences of her actions. William Fuller, Tracy's son, sat quietly during the trial. His admission of guilt was a pivotal moment in the case. William had confessed to the crime, revealing how his father had manipulated him into believing the murder was justified. The young man had been caught in the middle of a twisted scheme, unable to escape the influence of his father. His actions, while the result of coercion, would not go unpunished. As the trial progressed, the defense presented their arguments, but the evidence against Tracy, Tyan, and William was overwhelming. The jury deliberated, but it was clear from the start that the outcome was all but certain. Tracy Burleson was found guilty of capital murder. His sentence was life in prison without the possibility of parole. He would spend the rest of his life behind bars, a stark contrast to the life of privilege and power he had once enjoyed. Tyan Palmer was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. While she had not directly participated in the killing, her role in encouraging and facilitating the plot could not be denied. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison for her involvement in the crime. William Fuller, the son caught in the middle of his father's twisted scheme, was sentenced to 20 years for his role in the murder. His confession had shown the depth of his father's manipulation, but the court found that, ultimately, he was still responsible for his actions. The verdict was met with mixed emotions in the courtroom. For the Burleson family, the outcome brought no true sense of justice. No sentence could bring Paulette back or erase the pain caused by the betrayal of a loved one. For the community that had once admired Tracy as a pastor, the trial was a heartbreaking revelation of the darkness that had been hidden behind the facade of faith and trust. As the gavel fell, marking the end of the trial, the consequences of the crime were clear. 3 lives had been destroyed by greed, manipulation, and deceit. The family, the community, and the individuals involved would never be the same. Tracy Burleson, Tyan Palmer, and William Fuller were left to face the consequences of their actions. But the damage caused by their choices would be felt for generations to come. The echoes of Pastor Tracy Burleson's sermons once filled the walls of the church he led with pride. But now the pews are empty, the sanctuary quiet, nothing more than a hollow reminder of the man who had once been a pillar in his community. The vibrant congregation, who had come to trust and look up to Tracy for spiritual guidance, were left reeling from the betrayal that shattered the foundation of their faith. It wasn't just the murder of Paulette Burleson that shocked them. It was the realization that the person they had revered as a man of God had been hiding a dark secret. For those who knew the Burlesons, the tragedy was personal. Paulette's image, warm and loving, now serves as a reminder of a life lost too soon. She was a wife, a mother, a friend, a woman whose life was taken by the very people she trusted. The photographs of Paulette with her loved ones serve as a stark contrast to the violent end she met. No amount of justice could bring her back or heal the wounds left behind. The love she gave to her family, the trust she placed in those closest to her, was betrayed in the most horrific way possible. For William Fuller, the son who was caught in the middle of his father's plot, his future was forever altered. A young man who had once looked to his father as a role model now faced the consequences of his actions. William's life was marked by the manipulation of a father who had used him as a pawn, yet he could not escape the guilt of the crime he committed. His 20-year sentence was a tragic reminder of how one person's decisions could forever change the course of many lives. And then there is Tracy Burleson, locked away in a prison cell, stripped of his title, his family, and his freedom. The life he once led, one of power, respect, and influence, was now reduced to a small, cold space behind bars. There is no redemption, no future ahead for Tracy. The choices he made, driven by greed, lust, and manipulation, led him to this place, a far cry from the life he once enjoyed. A man who had preached faith and love now faced the consequences of betraying both. This case serves as a reminder of the consequences that follow choices made in pursuit of personal gain. It is a tragic story of a man who could not resist the temptation of power, money, and lust, even at the cost of his family's happiness. The ripples of his actions reached far beyond his immediate family. They affected his community, his church, and everyone who had placed their trust in him. Tracy Burleson's story is a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that actions have consequences, and no amount of manipulation or deceit can ever erase the damage done. The price of betrayal is not always paid in the moment, but in the aftermath, in the lives that are forever changed. As the final chapter of this tragic tale closes, the consequences of one family's choices remain a stark reminder of the dangers of betrayal and manipulation. The story of Pastor Tracy Burleson, his wife Paulette, and the events that led to her untimely death have left scars that will never fully heal. For those who have suffered through similar betrayals or endured the weight of deception, the aftermath of this crime is a painful but necessary reflection. It is important to remember that no one should have to face betrayal or abuse alone. If you or someone you know is struggling with emotional, physical, or psychological harm caused by deceit or manipulation, help is available. Reach out to the organizations that provide support for those in need. They offer assistance, guidance, and safety for anyone who feels trapped by a relationship or situation that has gone dangerously wrong. Thank you for taking the time to watch this story unfold. If you found this case informative, thought-provoking, or simply a reminder of the harsh realities some face in the world, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing real-life stories that highlight the complexity and depth of human behavior. We encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about this case? Do you believe that justice was truly served? We invite you to join us for more true crime documentaries, where we continue to explore the mysteries behind real-life events, shedding light on the darkness that often lurks beneath the surface.